We're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. And when we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Hey there, everybody. Happy Unmuted Monday. I'm so excited that so many amazing people are here today with us. Let us know if you're joining us. I see, oh my gosh, Zach Demopoulos is here. Son just got married recently. Congrats on that. Michael Skiba, welcome. Nancy Deborah Barros. We've got Laura Hamo here. Denise Bachman's going to be on Team Replay. That's awesome, Denise. Hi from Houston. Jacob always bringing the humor and levity. I so appreciate you, Jacob. Let's see, we've got Tim Stone in the house, Toby Castor, Rich Gasson. Let us know if you're joining us and where you're joining us from. I am in Baltimore, Maryland. I know we've got some West Coasters here. So feel free to let us know. And Rich, I know that intro video is the work of Daniel Hall, and he is just so talented. He's so talented. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you. There's always, there's always such joy that I feel from all of you, even though I can't see you. And so I'm grateful that you all are here, and it's going to be a great show. I'm super excited for our guest today, who's going to be coming on in just a little bit. But before we dive into our guest, one of the things that I wanted to do is, when I come on the show, I like to share with you things that I'm learning and things that I'm exploring and things that are helping me, frankly, because I know if I'm finding them helpful, you'll probably find them helpful too. And so one of the things that I do in a lot of the workshops that I facilitate is I invite people to take moments to reflect. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to take a moment and think about, and I'll share this for context. I was speaking at a women's event called Crew KC. They're in the women in the commercial real estate space in Kansas City. What a fun city, by the way. And yes, shout out to all the coasts. Agreed. And one of the things that was just so special about this group was spending time together and taking a moment to celebrate and elevate ourselves and each other, which is something I don't think that we do enough of. And Viana is here. Yes, we know each other through Jesse Hempel's Hello Monday show. Debbie Tucker's live from Indiana. Welcome, welcome. And one of the things that I asked the group to do is to think about something about themselves without being humble, something that they're proud of about themselves. If I were to ask you, hey, what's something about yourself that you don't like or that you pick at or that isn't working the way that you want it to, I think a lot of us could come up with a pretty long list of things. But when we pause and think about what am I proud of? Like, how can I let myself shine? If you think of like that Care Bear stare where they're there with like those beams of light coming out of their chest, right? Like, what would it look like if each of us let ourselves step into that place of genuine pride of something that we're proud of about ourselves. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment and think about what is something about yourself that you're proud of. Exactly. Brian, like seriously, Brian Schulman, you got to put on the sunglasses if you're going to be reflecting. Brian always, I mean, truly a delight. Check out Brian's shows on Wednesday night. What's Good Wednesday? And shout out Saturday. Liz Wool is here from Nashville. I was just in Nashville, Tennessee, Liz. So take a moment and if you'll just drop in the comments, what is something about yourself that you're proud of? Something personally, something professionally. People shared things in this conversation like, I'm proud of my 47-year marriage and the fact that I raised two independent, intelligent sons. Somebody else shared that they're proud of themselves for never giving up. Or somebody was proud of themselves for starting a nonprofit at age 70 or changing careers at age 60. I mean, these are powerful things. So take a moment, drop Maria, welcome. But what is something that you are proud of? What is something that you're proud of about yourself? Something that you are proud of or want to appreciate? Just take a moment, drop it, like brag on yourself. I want to celebrate each of you. This is part of what it means to be unmuted, is to take a moment and celebrate and elevate ourselves and each other. So drop in the comments, what is something about yourself that you are proud of? Something about yourself that you're proud of. Brian, you're so kind. I'm proud of you. I am proud of you too, Brian, and I'm excited that I'm going to get to meet you soon. So if you think about it, what is something that you are proud of about yourself? Something personally, something professionally? We'll give you an opportunity to drop those in the comments as it comes up for you. So feel free to, at any point in the show today, to drop that in. Brian says, I'm proud of my LinkedIn fam for showing up for one another with your whole hearts the way you do each and every day and lift one another up now more than ever. And Brian, you do that so well. I was having a week or two ago where I was feeling kind of out of sorts. And Brian has a show on Wednesdays called What's Good Wednesday. And there's a LinkedIn lip sync battle. Say that 5 times fast. And I knew that if I showed up on that show and I got to interact with him and Dr. Noopy, who was the host, that I would feel better. And I did, so I think that that's the power of community. Jess, welcome. It was so good to meet you at that event last week. Maria says, I think I'm pleasant. Let's just own it. We'll take out the words I think. You are pleasant to be around both in person and virtually. Tim is proud of sharing his cancer story for the first time in person this weekend at Andrea Sanchez's worthy in-person experience for Hope and Kindness in Houston. How about that? Liz worked full-time as a nurse, worked full-time and got her bachelor's degree in 9 years, many decades ago, but you did it. And it's hard to do. Yes. So really taking a moment and thinking about yourself and what are you proud of? What are you celebrating? I would encourage you to take that forward in the week with you, because again, too often we go through our days, we go through our weeks, and we never pause to think about, what am I proud of? What do I appreciate about myself? That's something you can teach to your team members. You can teach it to your kids. You could teach it to your friends and anyone you spend time with that you want to help elevate them. We want to focus on that. And Maria says too, she can multitask pretty well at any given time, and being proud of being connected to so many people that are here today. So without further ado, what I want to do now is I want to invite you to someone that I met through LinkedIn 4 years ago. It started out, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but just a cold message. I guess it was sort of a warm message. And then I'd been following his content for some time. And I felt like, you know what, I want to reach out to this person and connect with them and get to know them better, because I thought that he was interesting. And I thought that he shared different perspectives on things in the content he created, whether it was video or written content. I just felt like whenever I saw a post from him come up, it was something I wanted to click and something that I wanted to read. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, something like, I admire your content and what you share in here, and I'd love to connect. And we connected over the next couple of years, and I got to actually meet him in person. He came to Baltimore in August, and we got to film some content together. We'll talk more about that. But what I love about him is his sense of curiosity. Curiosity is a significant, hey, Sri is here, welcome. Curiosity is a value of mine. And it's something that I think if we can enter the world and our interactions with other people, and even the way we look at our future with a sense of possibility and curiosity, it's something that makes us feel alive. And it's really energizing. And what I love about Quentin is that he's somebody who imagines what could be and isn't limited by what is. He's a trailblazer. He's someone who loves to experiment and try new things and gives himself permission to fail and have things not work and then iterate and pivot. And I want to just introduce him by sharing a little bit of his story before I bring him up on stage. He was running a personal brand agency, and then in 2020, like everyone else, he faced some life-altering changes, including losing his younger brother to suicide, something he shared on LinkedIn and other social platforms. And today, we're going to dive into how his curiosity has shaped not only his professional life and his goals for his work, but also his life outside of work. And we're going to explore how he has unmuted himself and created a business that's aligned with his ideal lifestyle and what matters most. So if y'all will give a warm welcome to our guest today, Quentin Michael Allums. Quentin, welcome.
What's up?
Hi.
Can you hear me all right? I have not
I
had
hear you
any.
great.
Okay. I've got to apologize because I've got there's a C-stand back there. There's a mic. Normally I would clean up, but I've been a mess today. So thank you for having me.
You know what? We give people permission to be wherever they are in whatever state they're in. And if you just show up and are here, that's like all we can ask, frankly.
I appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words.
Yeah. No, I absolutely, I mean them. And it was so cool to get to hang out and meet in person. And I'm curious, and I'll share mine here, but one of the things I like to do on this show is invite people to grab something that's in their immediate space that represents something or someone meaningful to them, and to just tell us a little story about it. Because when we talk about who or what makes us feel alive, it's a way that we can be more unmuted. So while I'll let you think about that, and I'll share something that came up. Zach Demopoulos is I know him through the show, and we're going to get to meet in a couple of weeks. And he's a really cool guy. And he actually took the time to send me this custom made flashlight that says unmuted and shining. And he sent it to me as a reminder that I shine a light on people through this work that I'm doing. And took the time to send that to me and send me a card with a peacock on it, because he knows I like peacocks. And it was just, for me, this is an example of why I do what I do. And it's also a reminder of the power of community and feeling seen. So that's something meaningful to me. So I'm curious what you would share.
Yeah, I have a lot of things, but the only thing that was on my desk, I had my wallet on my desk, but I keep this in my wallet. It's a broken 3 of diamonds. I didn't have much of your traditional childhood. Having fun and being in the moment was always something that was hard for me because I was just always worried about other things. But I went to a show in LA and I felt like a child. It wasn't even a show, honestly. I was working for greatness, and there was a magician there. And he just did this magic trick that is probably so simple to normal people, but I was just mind blown. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I keep this in my wallet to remind myself to be in the moment, to have fun, and believe in magic.
That is way cool. I did not know that about you. That's that's super cool. And I'm curious for everyone who's here in the chat, if you want to drop in the chat, what would you share? What's the thing that you would share? Super cool. So how do you, I'm curious, relating to, I think being playful is one of the ways that we can unmute ourselves, because when you think about, ideally, when we're our most free, again, and ideally, it's not always our, for either of us, I don't think it was our situation growing up, but when you think of the image of a 5-year-old who's not really self-conscious and who just exists in whatever moment they're in, and they're not apologetic and they're expressive, I'm curious for you, what are some of the forms of, I'm going to ask you the forms of play that you engage in now as an adult that are really life-giving for you. And I also just want to acknowledge here Brian's share of just saying he's so proud of you. If you want to put that, so damn proud of this incredible human who has inspired me every day since we met 5 years ago. You lifted
Brian
me up more
dude.
times.
I actually physically lifted him up too. I think we have a photo of that.
For real?
Back in the day. Yeah.
Oh,
but
man,
Brian's amazing.
So
Brian is amazing.
That's so good.
I'm sorry. The question was,
how forms
do I
of play. How do you, again, connecting to that sense of aliveness, since it's something that you didn't necessarily feel like you had a lot of, or were able to really connect to growing up? What are some of the ways that you're doing that now in your life or your work? I'm curious.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I wrote a lot. I just had a lot of stories, random stories, novels, poems, journals, a bunch of stuff like that. So creating has always been a thing for me, and I still do that because it's like my full-time job. I create content. But in terms of like traditional play, like I love video games. I probably take them too seriously. I love to compete. I just started getting into tennis. I'm really bad at it. Just started getting into snowboarding. I'm really bad at it. Just started getting into golf. I'm really bad at it. But I think like embracing the fact that we do suck at things, I'm just not good at that. And I think when we do that, it's more fun, it's more playful, and we can enjoy the journey. So snowboarding, video games, tennis, golf, basketball. I don't know, like to move my body,
Yeah.
like to compete.
Yeah. That's super cool. And I appreciate your willingness to be bad, which I think is a theme across, I mean, having gotten to know you a bit, like a theme that I see that I really admire, because I think a lot of us, we don't want to even attempt something if we know we're not going to be good at it, or if we think we're not going to be good at it. And so then we miss out on what we could learn in the process of figuring out how to do the thing we don't know how to do,
Yeah,
you know?
honestly, yeah. Learning snowboarding, like I fell on my face so many times, and my girlfriend was trying to teach me. She's like, "Do this, do that," and I took her advice, but I said, "This is how I learned. So go have fun, and I'll figure it out." And then, like, end of the day, I'm chilling. I coast it because I know how I learn because I've failed so many times.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, like along that process, what would you say? So for someone like me, I know that have gotten to know a little bit about me and how I have this tendency to like, you kind of want to do it right, and we don't necessarily give ourselves permission to do it wrong as part of that. So I'm curious, for someone who's navigating that process of being hard on themselves, taking things too seriously, um, what would you suggest or offer? I know you're not one that likes to like tell people what to do, but like, what would you offer for someone who's in that spot of maybe trying something new? Maybe they're trying to unmute themselves or attempt something that's maybe a form of expression or a form of play or something that's not as familiar and comfortable, and they're getting stuck in the start or getting stuck in the fear of failing. What would you offer
Yeah,
to them?
I used to be a singer-songwriter. Again, I was not that good, but I was creative, which is how I got by, and made money for a little bit. And there were times, I was like 18, like 16 to maybe 22. I would like write a song and perform that song, and people would tell me, "Oh, I love that song. Please keep singing that song, and don't ask me to sing because it's just not going to happen. But please keep singing that song." Uh, and then I would just get stuck in like this one hit wonder syndrome. Oh my god, like this is a song, I can't perform another song. I can't practice another song when people are around, because if I mess up, it's going to be like, oh my, they're not going to think I'm a good and talented singer, a good songwriter, blah 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 blah, and so on. And that theme carried on through everything in my life. Like, I don't want to be bad at dancing in front of people. I don't want to be bad at playing basketball in front of people. I want to be great at everything. And that kept me from ever writing a good song again. That kept me from ever performing in a big spot again, because I was afraid to fail. Like, ever since I realized that, I've just pushed myself, like, go do things that you're bad at. Like, I love snowboarding. I freaking dream about snowboarding. I've been like 3 times. I'm so excited for winter, and I'm so bad at it, but I love it, because it's just like a rush, and I fall, but then it's like, okay, wow, like maybe I should lean a little bit. Maybe I should bend my knees more, like, oh, the doing it the right way feels this way. Like, we learn so much in the failures. And I think when we're so stuck on being perfect, we miss out on the biggest lessons and the most fun.
Yeah. I think that second part, it's like we miss out on big lessons, and Maria had mentioned like opportunities to improve. But to your point, if we're willing to approach it with this attitude of exploration and curiosity, then it's like it can be fun. Like the learning process, the process of falling on your face, however many times you do that, can be fun if you're viewing it as like, it's almost like if you're viewing it through like childlike eyes, then it's like it's fun. Kids screw up stuff all the time, and they're not like, oh, I didn't do it right, until an adult tells them they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
You know?
They miss a basket, they just keep shooting till they make it.
Right.
Like,
Exactly. And then even, when I think about what you were saying about the songwriting piece, I know we've talked about this, and I've shared this here on the show. I'm just beginning that journey, and being willing to be bad at it is something that it's like when you're stepping into a space where you feel like you have no competence whatsoever. It's it's almost like easier to enter that space with a bit of humility, because you're like, I am consciously incompetent at this because I have never done it before. And I know I was talking to the songwriter coach that I'm working with, and his name's Leroy, and he's a songwriter and composer. And I said to him, I said, look, dude, we might have to blow this song up like 15 different times. I'm okay with that. Like, I just want a certain feeling to be experienced as a result of people hearing this song and of me going through this journey. But if we have to change a melody line, if we have to change a lyric, I am so open. And I think taking that posture of curiosity and humility is something that makes it possible to grow through an experience of learning.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed. Excited for you to drop the music video on LinkedIn, just.
Yeah, that'll happen. It'll happen eventually. That does feel. And so Brian says here, speaking of fail, what does fail mean? First attempt in learning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Learn each and every time. Absolutely. And, it's like, there's so many awesome comments here. They're happening in the chat. Maybe we can bring some of them up, Jim. But, somebody actually shared here, like adult play honestly didn't start again until they happened upon, Voice Your Vibe, Brian's show. Right. And, being afraid to fail, it's a big hurdle, right? But choosing to be okay in that place of imperfection can be really powerful. So let me see. Can't see this. You might need to refresh it. If you can't see this chat stream, you might just need to refresh the page. Just a heads up for anybody that maybe can't do that. Willing to be bad, willing to be learning, Nancy says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in working, Toby says exactly what I learned learning to figure skate. It's worth doing, even though I was doing it poorly. Then it was exhilarating when I gained competence.
That sounds so difficult. I'll stick to snowboarding. I'd probably cut something open. Yeah.
Like that blade's real thin. There's not a lot. I'm just not sure I'm feeling that so much. Not sure I'm feeling that so much. But and I know for you, like one of the things that I see in you is that you're constantly, even with the work that you're doing as a creator and as somebody who is supporting other creators, that you are so willing. One of the things you said to me that I wrote down when we were talking the other day was that is sort of hard for my soul to hear, but I know I need it. You said something along the lines of like, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to bomb. Like, don't be afraid to like, just let it not work at all. Can you speak to that? Because I think, especially like on platforms like this or on other places like Instagram or TikTok, or just putting our voice out there in general, that fear that we have with like the ultimate is that I totally bomb, right? And it just is embarrassing and humiliating and whatever. We tell ourselves a story about what's going to happen if we bomb. I'm curious about how you got to a place of thinking that way and approaching the work that you do that way. And along a similar lines of the play question, what you might kind of invite someone into that's in that spot of, I'm so afraid to bomb and I'm so afraid to fail. So I'm holding back on putting anything out there. Just curious on that. So
yeah. I think first, like defining what does bomb mean? Like I have created some really bad pieces of content and they've bombed, right? Like no one viewed them, whatever, but has that affected my life? No, not at all. I've also went up on stage and forgot everything I was supposed to say. Like I bombed. Then I was like, okay, let's figure it out on stage live. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about. And it wasn't great. But I learned a lot and I will never do that ever again in my whole entire life. I will prepare on a level that no one else does because I will never feel that again. And I will never disappoint people like that again. I think with content specifically though, like the thing that really shifted for me was I took 2 years off after my little brother died, basically. Like I still worked kind of, but I was drifting, doing nothing, whatever. And people kept coming in like, yo, like, can we work together? Like, hey, like, what would it look like if I wanted to go to X, Y, and Z? And I wasn't posting anything consistently at all, and for the longest time, my, like the the dollars that I brought in was directly correlated with the amount that I created content and how often that content went viral. When I started shifting it and really understanding where money came from, besides the content that was going viral, and also like how I was nurturing people with content that maybe wouldn't go viral, but was very valuable. Like, here's a full out system. Here's how you build it. Or this is how you create your process for your videographer, like things like that. You know, they're not going to go viral, but they really show people, they really give people insight into the world that you're living. If you're afraid to bomb, you're never trying anything new. And if you're never trying anything new, you're just going to be drowned into the background with everything else that everyone else is creating. If you're just posting selfies on LinkedIn, you're going to look like everyone else on LinkedIn. If you're just posting, just following trends on TikTok, you're going to be like everyone else on TikTok. You have to try things new and you have to bomb in order to stand out. Because if you're not standing out, you're not, like, it doesn't matter. You're going to drown away. You know, people are going to forget you, and then you're not going to make money over time, in my opinion. I think being different, being distinct is the most important thing brand wise, and bringing value, of course. But
yeah. And I think too, for you, I mean, like the peace sign and then like the hat, you're like, in terms of having like tangible symbols of a brand, I feel like were two things people would know you for.
yeah, I don't know. I'm about to cut off all my hair because my hair is a mess. And then I'm thinking about moving away from the hats. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I'm thinking of just like, I want to be like a whole brand just as me, like dyed hair, tattoos, you know, like, I don't know, but we'll see. I still got the hat wall. You can't see it, but
and what is the story behind that? So I wonder if I could, gosh, I wish I'd thought to like pull this up ahead of time, but kind of like like just tell a story about that hat. Like, why did you start doing that? And
I've got a bunch of them now, but it started with one. I met Goldie Chen. And she came to Milwaukee, and it was me and then my former business partner, and then Goldie came out. We were just shooting content, talking about this stuff, and I was creating consistently around the time, but not videos. And then I was just thinking about it, and I was like, yo, like, everyone knows Goldie, green hair, like, she's very unique. And I wanted something where I'm like, okay, this is me. It speaks to me. It's who I am, but also like, Q's a guy with X. And I was just online. I was like, damn, like, this hat looks like the hat that I used to wear in like an MMO RPG that I used to play when I was a little kid. I want this thing. It was only $40. I was poor as hell at the time. So I picked it up and I just started wearing it every single day, every meeting, every video, like on the streets, and people made fun of me. Like, I remember getting back from New York, landing in Milwaukee because I was living in Milwaukee at the time. And then I was walking home and a guy was like, yo, are you going on a safari? I was like, fuck you. But that's how it was for the longest time. And then all of a sudden people were like, yo, I love that hat. Like, it's so smart of you to consistently wear that hat, you know, and it worked out. Really did.
That's cool. I didn't know the origination of it makes sense. I mean, given the focus on games too, you know, now, but it's like the being willing to be different is the thing. And it's really hard to be willing to be different for a long period of time when you don't feel like it's necessarily paying off, when you can't see that the response you're hoping for is the response that you're getting. And I want to pull in some comments that I'm seeing. And by the way, it sounds like some people are having trouble accessing the LinkedIn feed. So I dropped in the link to the YouTube feed in case anyone needs that. Just a heads up, it's in the chat. And maybe Jim, you can help me with that too. So one of the things Brian was saying, first of all, he goes, the lid. It's not about whether you fail in the process, it's about getting up after every time you do that. For that is what makes you stronger, right? And then Nancy saying you can avoid failure by doing the same thing over and over again, but living takes risks, which I feel like is something that you do well. And even when I think of something that when I first started posting a singing video on LinkedIn, right? I was like, I would not sing in front of even one other person as a child, and then started to just share videos that integrated singing and found that people responded, had no idea what was going to happen, right? Because it's like, you could say this is a business platform. We also have these thoughts that we have and stories we tell ourselves about what's okay and what's not okay. And I could say it's totally inappropriate to be sharing a singing video on a business platform, right? What will people think? But I've gotten business from it. I've gotten business from people saying, oh, I saw that video of you singing and we're doing an event. We want you to speak at it, but could you like sing at the end of the event too? And it's a thing that sometimes the very thing that that makes us different is the very thing we also can feel tempted to hide because it makes us stand out. And if we're honest, it's very vulnerable to stand out. It's vulnerable to put ourselves in a position of being seen. And if we're willing to stick with it, though, because we really stand by it and believe it, it can also lead to a significant payoff, sometimes literally. And the other, like at some point in time in the future, we may not know the timeline.
Yeah. And it usually does pay off. We're just not consistent enough typically.
Yeah. And I think you've been, I mean, even just talking to you recently, you're saying like, I've tried different things, like post every day, post stuff 2 or 3 times a day, and just like staying in front of people, staying present in front of mind. And I'm curious here. Hold on a second. There's some stuff going on in the chat. Dr. Noopy just popped in. Hey, Dr. Noopy from the UK. Toby asked a question. How do we get back to where we were when the episode suddenly stops? Oh, sorry about that. That's a technical question. Maybe Jim, you can drop some stuff in the links in the chat there from the YouTube page. Just pull that out if you wouldn't mind. We had issues with this on the last show too. I don't know what it is with LinkedIn.
It's always been like that. You have to refresh a lot, which is annoying.
It's very annoying. Maybe we'll switch to Restream. I don't know. But so I got distracted there for a second.
It's all good. Story of my life.
You pivot and you iterate. I mean, this is what it is, right? It's just kind of being willing to let things not go right and then just figuring out how to respond in the midst of it. And Shay Akai is welcome here. Is here too. Welcome. So I guess if you don't mind, one of the things I want to touch on, I want to just dive into some other things in terms of your mental health advocacy in a moment. But one of the things you're doing that I think is really interesting right now, and you've been promoting it on LinkedIn, you're promoting it on your website, is this, it's an experiment. Can I go from 0 to $1 million in a year? And I'm just curious if you share with us where that idea comes from, and how you're navigating that right now, and like what made you decide to do that?
Yeah, it's probably not what people would think. One, I really want to, like, I see so many creators struggle. There's a friend of mine with 1 million followers, and he's working in a warehouse and struggling to figure out how to monetize that. I come from a world in which you only need 1,000 to 5,000 to make a really, really good amount of money, followers wise. So it's just something I'm good at. So I really wanted to create a blueprint, not necessarily the blueprint, because there's people that are smarter than me and have done this way better, but a blueprint for creators to follow if they want to do the same thing. One, and then two, I'm always a guy behind other people, and I'm good at it and I love it. But I think me in my peak form is me in the front, but also behind people, like Batman in the Justice League. You know, he's his own superhero, but he also he just is a strategist behind people at the same time in the Justice League, something like that. So just to boost myself up, because I'm always boosting other people up and I need to focus on myself more than I do. And then three, I have really bad ADHD. I get so bored. Like if I don't have something big that I'm going after, it's like, this is going cool, you know, like cool, we made 6 figures, but is it impacting people? No. Like let's do something else. Like that's me. So I found that I just need a big mission to go after, and this was something that I really wanted to do and something that I knew I could grow with follower wise as well. And it's, for the most part, it's good. The last few months, just mental health wise, like my brother's birthday was September 15th and he died October 4th to the 5th. I don't really have a date for it, but this time for me has always been very hard. So I've just been giving myself grace, not doing as well as I want to, but I also planned a little ahead, and it's just, I'm not vibing with the plan. So I've tweaked some things, and like, I'm making money. I'm fine, but I want to adjust how I'm making it and what I'm doing specifically. And I've found that what I've been selling is great, and I'll probably continue selling it, but people really like the system that I built. And I think that's what I'm going to move towards selling. So I'm trying to figure that out, just linked with the media buyer. And we'll probably be running some paid ads to that and figuring out my model moving forward, but it's good. It's challenging me and helping me think differently. And then I have a community around me that's doing the same thing with me, which is cool. It's a guy going after like 2.2 million, which is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, these are big numbers, right? Like, yeah. pretty motivating. And I think even in the midst of what you just shared, you're constantly someone who iterates, right? You're like, all right, well that didn't work. It doesn't mean the whole thing doesn't work. It just means what can I tweak and what can I modify here? And I feel like you're teaching me that too, of going through a process of like, don't get so hung up on any one thing. Just allow yourself to lean into what's working and um, lean into what feels good. And again, you're very data driven with what you do. I don't know if people like would know that as much about you on the surface, right? But you are so data driven in how you make decisions. Like, and so it's impressive. I mean, I'm not that way inherently, and I feel like it's helpful and sometimes
You
hard.
don't need to be that way though, you know? Like
Yeah.
I wasn't either when I was running Misfits. Like I wasn't at all. But then like it was just me and I'm like, oh, I kind of think this way. This really supports my experiments. Let's lean into this. But I think people like you need to be like present in what you do. Like there's no time to obsess over the data. You need other people to obsess over the data. Like otherwise you'd just be in the weeds. So
yeah, all the time. I'd be on the weeds all the time, which sometimes I am more than I want to be. And something that you brought up that if you're, you know what, I know actually October, a lot of the times the focus is on mental health this month. And I know you have talked about and you've interviewed other people, you've talked to strangers. I know some of the stuff that you've posted on your site as well about conversations that you've had with strangers about mental health. And I'm just curious when we think about unmuting ourselves. So side note, I want to mention, I know I messaged you about this book, but I want to mention here to anybody, whoever's with us today, this is a book that I started reading. It just came out last month. It's as thick as a Bible. Don't let that intimidate you. It's called The Myth of Normal.
I love really big books. I don't know why. It makes
You
me
do?
happy. Yeah. Like if I could chill in a library, I've been looking for a really good library in Denver. Haven't found one, but I love really big books. Don't know why.
Well, if anyone knows a really good library in Denver,
Please
let Quentin know. But this book by Gabor Mate, he's written other books that I have called, he's written one called When the Body Says No. He's written one in the Something of Hungry Ghosts about addiction. He's written books about ADHD specifically. And it's a phenomenal book, really looking at trauma, which is at the root, frankly, of pretty much any suboptimal behaviors that we have at any point in our lives as kids or as adults. And so that would be a book recommendation as we're, diving into mental health. I'm just curious. It can be hard to talk about personal things in our lives that are really deeply painful that we're still working through and figuring out ourselves, what we think and feel about. And I know you've started to share some of your story and experience on social media over the past several years. I'm curious, what gave you the courage to start talking about those things publicly, however you want to go there with that, and what can still sometimes be a challenge?
Yeah. To be honest, people thank me for speaking publicly about grief. But if I'm being honest to myself in the world, I speak publicly about grief and pain because that's how I've always processed things as a child, not necessarily speaking, but creating. As a child, I didn't share it because there was no medium to share it. But eventually, like I was spending all my time on like writers forums and things like that. Just how I've always been to process publicly because I didn't necessarily have a space to do that in relationships or in family. So it's not that I have the courage, it's that I think I haven't had the courage to go speak to a therapist, to go speak to even my girlfriend or people close to me. I just don't do that often. I don't have people around me that I feel comfortable speaking to. And it's not on them. I think the people around me are great. It's on me and the trauma that I've gone through in my life and as a child. So I wouldn't even but I'm sure it's good and it's helped people. But again, like same with content, I'm always pushing people. I think the best thing I can do for the world and for me is to help myself, which finally got a therapist after 3 years, which is so sad, but I'm glad I'm there. But I think that's the biggest challenge is to not just having to make everything content, but to also think through like, how do I actually feel? How am I feeling? Do I want to talk about this? And giving myself permission to speak to people about my pain and not just speak about their pain. So I think it's all a challenge. I'm good at creating content. I'm good at creating stories. Like I could do that all day, but sometimes that gets in the way of me actually working through the things that I'm going through.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's probably a common experience people have seen. I want to call attention to what Toby said. I think it's one of the hardest things about sharing personal experience is believing that it matters to anyone else, muting ourselves simply because we don't believe we matter, or that part of ourselves matters to others, that people are interested in that part of us. Like sometimes that can cause
my biggest challenge. I don't think anyone cares about anything. If I'm being like, it's always been a challenge, which is why creating has been so freeing, because it's like, oh, people do care, but they're way across the world, like they're not here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's easier to create it in a space it's easier to share it in a space we feel competent.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing the hard work underneath addressing it.
Yeah.
Like, I think what you mentioned, giving yourself the ability to feel, or permission to feel. I would reach for it. I don't want to unplug my headphones. There's another book called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett, who's out of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I really love his book because it's very clear of just outlining kind of this process of giving ourselves that permission to feel. I think to your point, a lot of people process their stuff externally, online, on social media, and never take the steps. So you might have said it's taken me 3 years, but at least you've done the thing. There are people that for years, or maybe even probably decades, externally put all their stuff out in the world, and then they're never actually doing the hard work of addressing the behind the scenes stuff, the root cause stuff that needs attention, because that doesn't necessarily get seen on social media.
Yeah. It doesn't get views. It doesn't get likes.
It's a private journey. And the private journey is the part where the transformation, there's both. Healing happens in community and healing happens individually, like with the guidance of a coach or a therapist. I think, being willing, and I appreciate Brian's calling this out to you specifically, of, helped him to be brave, get vulnerable, and share his grief, pain, and hit post on a very vulnerable post recently. About a very, part of his life happening, his divorce, right? Sometimes when we think people see us in a certain way, we almost self-censor. We're like, oh, well, they see me as this way, or they expect this from me. So that part of me, is that going to be accepted? Is that going to be welcomed? Has that ever been a part of your thought process of wondering, like, people expect this from me. If I share this, will that affect how they see me or what they think of me? Has that ever been a thought?
Yeah, not so much from like a vulnerability standpoint, but from like a pivot. Like when I closed down my company and didn't know who I was anymore and what I was going to do. And specifically like now, like let's run an experiment. Like I was never doing that before, at least publicly. I was always doing it privately, but with that vulnerability wise, so I've never struggled, because those aren't the things that like I consider vulnerable. If we sat across from each other and you wanted to talk about my brother, that would be hard for me because I'd want to cry. And like, that's real feeling. I don't feel those things often. When I was talking to my therapist, I was like, oh my God, like I don't feel at all. But I have such a deep capacity to feel. So It's sad that I don't anymore, or if you want to talk about like how I'm really feeling, that's very, very hard for me. I could talk about it online all day, like all day. That's just not hard. Anything I was going through, but like, it just wouldn't be difficult for me online, but one-to-one, difficult. Singing one-to-one, oh my God, no. for 500 people, yeah, whatever, cool. Like I've always been that way. Always. I don't know what it is. That intimacy, I think I fear it sometimes.
Yeah, it's incredibly vulnerable to just sit across. I'm with you. I just thinking of like, oh, sing alone to one person, even just what you're like, there's that. Notice what you feel in your body. So I see a type of therapist called a somatic therapist. I know I've mentioned this to you. And somatic therapists, they are really trained in understanding the body and recognizing that emotions are like literally like energy in motion. They're feelings. They're called feelings because you feel them. And for so many of us, I was listening to a podcast that Gabor Mate was on recently, and was talking to Tim Ferriss. And one of the things he talked about is the two fundamental needs we have are attachment and authenticity. And if we learn at a young age that me expressing my authentic self is not safe, is rejected, leads to some type of animosity or anger, or that need is not met, then I get the subconscious message, it is not safe to express your authentic self if you still want to preserve your attachment. So then you just learn to suppress as a coping mechanism. You learn to suppress your authentic self and your authentic needs.
Yeah.
Because you want to stay attached, even if the attachment's not healthy.
I think that is a version of it for me. I don't know if it's attachment. I've been thinking about that exact statement. I think for me, it's my attachment to my identity and what you just said, the trauma that I've gone through and what I've been shown and the beliefs that I have. If I choose to open up, let's say in an intimate setting, that then changes my entire identity. Oh, wow, people do care. Oh, wow, like maybe I'm not this type of, like, so I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Still exploring that. Shit's painful.
It is.
Stuff is painful. I'm sorry
to
say
shit. It's okay. You're fine. You're fine. You're allowed to say that. No, but it's true. We have these identities that we carry, and sometimes we use it as like almost like a protection, like we hold on to the thing because we're familiar. So for instance, the belief I've carried a lot of my life is that I wasn't wanted by my peers because I didn't feel like I fit in growing up. My mom had postpartum depression with me, so we had some not really strong attachments when I was growing up. And I remember talking to, it was my birthday, and I was talking to a group of women. There were like 5 or 6 of us having a gathering to celebrate. And I was telling the story. I sort of joked about it. I was like sharing how I didn't feel connected and my mom had postpartum. And then I said, my parents have always told me they know the exact day I was conceived, like, like just like stuff that people don't want to think about. And this woman, Eleanor, looked at me and she paused and she just had this look of kindness. And she said, "Oh, you were so wanted." And I, for the next hour, was completely done. I was sobbing. I mean, I had this visceral reaction to her saying that to me because it countered a narrative I have carried with me for so much of my life, which is like, you are not enough as you are. In other words, like you are not wanted here. And sometimes it can be in a moment with a conversation with a friend, a conversation with a stranger, a conversation with a therapist or a coach, where someone just says something that fundamentally challenges the core of how we see ourselves. And that in that moment can lead to an awakening and unmuting, right? That helps us to rewrite how we even see ourselves. And being willing to be in those moments and not escape them. I think it's tempting for us when we have a moment of discomfort or when those beliefs or identity pieces are challenged. It's so much more comfortable to like run the heck away. You're like, no.
I know. Yeah.
Like, we're not going to go there. So then we run away or we, and we try to escape it because we're like, oh, that is too hard to sit with. And one of the things, so that was one experience, and there's, by the way, so much goodness going on in the comments here. I cannot keep up with all of it. Y'all are awesome. I just want to say that for being here and being so supportive. Something that was helpful to me, that may be helpful to you and anyone listening. I've shared this with you because you heard it when you were here, but I was in therapy about a year ago and I was talking to my therapist about getting caught up in comparison and how that causes panic in me. And I feel anxious and all that kind of stuff. And welcome, Enrique. Good to have you here, dude. We're talking about a lot of things. We don't like to be boxed in. We're talking about whatever the heck we feel like talking about is what this is. And so I was talking to her about that. And she said, can you take a moment, kind of like we started the show today where I asked people to share something they're proud of. You think of a moment you were really proud of yourself. And I said, yeah, when I got this award. Right? So of course it's competence achievement oriented thing where I got this award in 2015 and found out I was the #1 health promotion professional in the country, which fed my starving ego, which needed to know that other people saw me as accomplished. And yes, to not being afraid of therapy. It is the start. It's a tremendous catalyst for healing. So I'm talking to her about this and And I was saying, oh, I was on a Skype video. I still have the Skype video. I can like look back and relive that moment. And she goes, okay, so I want you to sit with that and notice in your body, where do you feel that experience? So for like a good little student, right? Because I'm like, be a good kid, follow the rules, do what's expected. I sat there quietly for a minute until I thought it was probably enough time to look like I'd been thinking about it or paying attention to whatever she was asking me to do. And I want to come to Nancy's comment in just a second. But after about a minute, I looked at her and she was like, so where do you feel that in your body? And what do you feel? And I said, I don't. Like, I don't feel that anywhere in my body. But if you'd asked me, hey, Rachel, how do you feel when you're comparing yourself to people? I'm like, oh, I feel constriction in my chest. I feel tightness in my jaw. I feel like myself closing in on myself. We can become very familiar with the physiology of a certain way of feeling. That's taken time too to identify. For anyone listening, whenever you're going through any situation, it's like a pause, a moment of body awareness where you pause. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? And so she said to me, you know, like you can learn to do this by sitting with, it's called taking in the good, by when you're in one of those moments of sitting with it just a little bit longer. Like when you're in an emotional state, even if you're in sadness or if you're whatever state you're in, to be with it a little longer, enough to notice where you feel it in your body. And where you feel it in your body, it's like we store trauma in different places in our body. And I remember another therapist mentioned some years ago, I told her all my issues with my health have been around my throat and my voice and strep throat and bronchitis and laryngitis. And she said there's a theory that we store emotions and certain emotions in certain parts of our body. And the throat is where we store sadness. Undone again. I am a crier. I am comfortable crying. And I think I've spent so much time with myself in that space. And that has taken the past 5 years to get to the point where I'm comfortable being with a big emotion and not trying to hide from it. So just encouragement for anyone that's in that position, right? Of feeling like this is so big. Like, how do I even begin to navigate this? And the reality is if we're willing to stick with it and we have the courage to keep going and to keep leaning in instead of running away, that so much healing is possible. And as we build our capacity to navigate hard things, we increase our capacity to be with other people who are going through those hard things without them feeling like they have to apologize or shut down for it. And so I don't know, I wanted to offer those things in case any of that is helpful or resonant.
It's beautiful.
Thanks.
And difficult.
It's the hardest thing. It's literally the hardest thing you'll ever do is to turn the mirror on yourself and face your own demons and not run away from them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, my therapist said something interesting. I said, I think I'm afraid to go through all of this because I won't like who I am on the other side. Or if I am someone else on the other side, I won't be as effective in business, or I won't be like in all these different areas of my life. And he said there are so many different threads. He didn't say this exactly. He reminds me of Tim Ferriss. He said it so beautifully, and I can't say it the same way, but he said, like, there are so many different layers of self, you know, and it's not that I won't be as effective in business, you know, it's just, I don't even know what he said. I should have written it down, but it was beautiful to remind me of that. But thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, it's true. There are multiple layers, and sometimes we have to be, it's a journey. Speaking of a journey of experimenting and discovering, and I'm with you, Nancy Deborah, on the ugly, snotty, unsexy cry. It is what it is. As somebody who's so curious, right? It's like turning the curiosity you have towards your work and the systems and processes you create, and like turning that curiosity on yourself and being like, how could I view this as an experimental journey of discovering?
That is a good point. But then I'm afraid I'm going to like make so much content around it. And it's just going to, but that is a good point. You know, like I have this which is probably going to sound weird to anyone that like follows me. I have this narrative in my head that I need to be a villain or I am a villain in certain areas. I consider myself to be very, very kind as well, but in certain areas, like something happens, like I will flip a switch and like boom, I want to break that. I don't know what it. I don't know. Like that's cool. Like that could be a cool experiment. There's a lot of those narratives that I have in my head though.
Yeah.
Like, business wise, that villain comes out and it's terrible.
Mm. Well, or it is, right? If it's like viewing it without judgment, it's like the parts of ourselves. There's something called internal family systems therapy thing, and that I've learned from my therapist. And it's like we have parts of ourselves, and we want to punish or disconnect from or hate certain parts of ourselves. And it's like instead of hating a certain part of ourselves or not liking it or getting mad at it, and I still struggle with this. So I'm speaking this as somebody who's in the journey, not arrived. But two of the questions that Gabor Mate actually shared in the Tim Ferriss conversation is, how has this served you? How has this part of you served you or protected you in some way? And what would it look like if you were to thank that part of yourself and to release it from its duty?
Thank my inner Darth Vader.
Uh-huh.
That's a good question. That's a powerful question. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. So much here. And I just want to call out to you, there's so much love. Brian, I really need to hug you both, Q and Rachel sandwich. And just so much of what people are sharing. Sri is sharing right about crying, allowing your feelings to come out. And her brother's birthday is on the 5th. I learned how important it is when celebrating. And I know I've missed some of the comments in the chat from people that have just shared such powerful things. And, Dr. Newby speaking about couldn't voice my feelings or speak up or assert my needs because we get caught in people pleasing and perfectionism. And it takes courage to journey into that healing path. I mean, and to allow the evolving, which is something I feel like you do so well. It's just like applying that system to another area of your life. You have the capacity to do all of these things, and I appreciate you. Is there anything else that you'd want to close on, share here today, let people know about? We'll drop your social links again in the comments. We've got your LinkedIn, TikTok, and your website. Jim will drop those in. But is there anything else that you want to, I don't know, leave us with or share that you didn't say?
Two things. One, very weird, but again, this is the problem with me, but it's also a gift. This would be a super dope show, just like a live therapy session. You'd have to get like the approval, of course, for anyone that is like a therapist or anything like this would be sick. But it would be difficult to get someone to agree to do that. Two, just content creators and the follow culture, I think has us put a lot of people on pedestals, but all of us freaking struggle with a lot of things. So thank you for sharing and thank you for giving me space to share. This is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, good. No, thank you. I appreciate you and I appreciate how you show up and the courage with which you show up in the world. And I am enjoying just getting to see you do your thing. And I'm excited to see where you go. I think everyone here, I mean, there's a lot of people here that are big fans of yours and new fans of yours that, will now get to see you and follow you. And I'm here for it. I'm here for the whole thing to see what evolves and to do whatever I can to be supportive along that path as somebody who is also on it too, of this unending journey to healing and wholeness that we're on our whole lives, and just being willing to be in that spot and to not rush it, to not get upset with it, to not expect it to be something that it's not, but just as you mentioned earlier, to hold, that grace for ourselves as we're going through it. So
I appreciate you. And last thing I did want to say, because I want it to be recorded and I want to have proof. I 1,000% believe it's not a question. Rachel's going to be huge. Rachel's going to be like Brene Brown, Oprah. I'm calling it now. It is recorded. It is documented. Yes. And I get like 0.001 of the credit. So.
I appreciate, you're going to make me cry. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for celebrating me. And thank you for believing in me. You're someone whose belief in me I borrow, and I mean that. And I receive that. I received that word, and yes. So thank you. This has just been such a my week could be done now and be like fantastic week done. So thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us, Enrique and Nancy and Zach and Brian and Sri and Dr. Noopy and Toby. And I know Michael was here, and I think I mentioned Enrique and Jill. Just so many amazing Zach, Jim, Tim, Nancy, Brian, I'm sure Jacob, just such an incredible community of supportive people. So thank you again. And I hope that all of you have a fantastic week. And remember to step forward, be willing to fail, be willing to bomb, be willing to be bad, and to invite yourself into more playfulness and curiosity along the journey of figuring out whatever it is you're figuring it out, personally or professionally. So thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see you again on Halloween for our next show. Have a great week, everyone.